Hello sports fans and welcome back to another Bike Bros bike review. My name is Graham, I'm the owner of Bike Bros. We're a bike shop in Cochrane, Alberta, Canada, and we like to go over bikes, show you some of the details, talk about some of the things of the bike that you may not be able to tell from the manufacturer's website, and perhaps even from some of the reviews that you would see online. So today we're looking at the 2023 Giant Rain Advanced Pro 1. So when you see that name, Rain means a 170 millimeter travel bike, Advanced means carbon, and the Pro 1 is the level of quality of all the bits and pieces on this bike. Today I'm going to tell you about this bike, show you a whole bunch of details, tell you a little bit about the history of the Giant Rain, and hopefully give you some insight as to why this would be an amazing option if you were looking for a really capable, well-priced enduro race bike. So that's going to be where we go next. So we'll start with some of the figures with this bike. This bike in Canada, $79.99 Canadian. We're a Canadian bike shop, so of course we're going to quote that price. In the States, I noticed that on the US Giant website that they're listing this with a sale price of $64.60 USD. Another number that people want to know when they see these reviews is weight. This guy comes in at 32.8 pounds, which if you've been paying attention to bike weights as of late, that is an extremely impressive enduro race bike weight, especially because this thing has real tires on it. And by real, I mean they would actually be suitable for enduro racing or for sort of hardcore, harsh conditions riding. So a very good price, a very competitive weight. I told you earlier, 160 millimeters of travel in the rear, 170 millimeters in the front, and we have 29-inch wheels on here. Other things that relate to numbers are hidden right there, and then right there, that is the extra flip chip. They call this a 3-position flip chip on this bike. What it actually is 2 different flip chips, one of which, that extra one hanging there, can be flipped in either direction to give you 3 different suspension settings, basically. What that's going to do, once again back to the numbers, that's going to raise your BB height, raise or lower a total of 10 millimeters, and at each end of that range you'll be adjusting seat post and or seat angle and head tube angle by 0.7 degrees. If that doesn't sound like much to you, it's not a huge difference, but I would say it is noticeable, and that BB height thing for some people is going to be really important, and that could be on either end of the spectrum. People who are going to be riding this in really chunky pedally terrain are going to love the fact that they can raise that by 10 mil. If you're riding in ultra high speed terrain, being able to drop that BB 10 millimeters is a nice advantage for stability. So those are a bunch of the numbers to do with this bike. I'll next be talking about specifications. There's a few things to highlight when we're talking about specifications on this bike. I would say one thing is the fact that we see a combination of a SRAM GX Eagle drivetrain on here, and it's a very complete GX Eagle drivetrain. So when I mean complete, I mean that derailleur is GX, that cassette is GX, chain is GX, cranks are GX, as well as our shifter up here. So that is kind of rare in itself. A lot of bikes that you will see called GX spec, they'll have an NX chain or they'll have a down-spec'd crank. They'll often be calling it a GX drivetrain, but the only thing really that's GX is, in many cases, the rear derailleur and maybe just the shifter alone. So that is one special thing on here, and I don't know of anybody who's ridden GX that would have any complaints at all to make about it. It's a beautiful shifting, beautiful working, durable drivetrain, so there's nothing to complain about at all. And of course with SRAM's version of GX, you go from 10 to 52 teeth there. So they spinal tapped us and one-upped the Shimano guys who went 1051. Of course, SRAM went 1052 on that. So a good thing to note. The rare thing then that happens on here, that for those people who aren't fans of SRAM, usually it's SRAM brakes are the things that if people choose not to like SRAM, it is a SRAM brake that is their turn off. So in this case, we see a full SRAM drivetrain matched up with a Shimano SLX 4-piston brake set. So the magic with the Shimano SLX brakes is they're super easy to bleed. You don't get that 2-syringe kind of doctor job that you have to do on the SRAM stuff. And while Shimano, I would say you bleed them more often, they're extremely easy to bleed, and then you're dealing with mineral oil, not dot fluid, so you have something that's way less corrosive. And if you believe the marketing material from Shimano, actually has a higher heat tolerance, and that mineral oil also doesn't absorb water out of the air basically, so the fluid doesn't degrade just from existing. So that is a really cool feature. SLX along with GX, a brake and shifting combo. Now the one thing that would have been nice to see on here is that the brake itself, if they had put the finned brake pads on here, but that might be just asking too much because this bike is a very, very good value at its current price. And it does give you room that you could be upgrading this in the future. The fin brake pads will of course help to dissipate heat out of the brakes, and that is one of the biggest tricks with brakes and reducing brake fade, is getting the heat the heck out of there. The other thing that you do to get a lot of brake power is putting on huge rotors, and Giant was very good in this case. That front rotor is a 220mm rotor. So that is starting to become an upgrade that aggressive riders are doing on a common basis, and it is already done for you. Once again, sort of in line with the fin brake pads I would have liked to have seen, it would have been nice to see a little bit higher quality rotor on here. Shimano does do some 2-piece rotors that you have a thicker aluminum spider, and that once again helps to dissipate heat and also gives you a little bit of a stiffer rotor, which I find becomes a little bit of a durability thing. But it's a little bit of nitpicking, but I would say there's 2 places that people may end up upgrading. If you burn through those brake pads, then once it's time to replace, you can put on finned ones, and same thing if you damage that rotor, you can put on a larger fancier rotor, either from Shimano or from some of the other companies that do nice 2-piece stiffer rotors. So just some nice details to point out, things that are special. The rear rotor, I should point out, that is they call it a 200mm rotor on the specs. I would think that it's actually a 203 being a Shimano rotor, because they tend to live in that world, but I actually haven't spun it to see what the number is printed on there. Either way, 200 in the back, 220 in the front, a very practical setup for braking for a bike that is designed to go downhill at ridiculous speed. Getting back into spec, we have the Giant TRX 2 wheel set. So what this is Giant's carbon rims. This newest generation that's been around for a few years has proved to be quite durable, unlike the first generation of carbon wheels that Giant did. This level doing much, much better. I don't think I've seen a failure in our shop, at least yet, on this level of rims. The TRX2 hub that's in there, it is a 3-pole design, and nobody is going to accuse this bike of having super fast engagement. So we do have a number of degrees of before engagement happens in that free hub. Have I heard anything about longevity on that? That part I haven't really heard yet, but just so you know, that is one of the places, if you're going to make an $8,000 bike, which is a ridiculously large amount of money, but if you're going to make an $8,000 bike and put on a lot of the things that are on here, including carbon hubs or carbon rims, the hubs is one of the places where maybe they have to take a little bit of a shortcut. On the plus side, this isn't some sort of a proprietary weird spoke count on here. So if you happen to frazzle that hub, you could go out and get one of many different hubs from, say, Hope, I9, DT Swiss, because this is a 28-hole wheel. So you could rebuild that very good rim onto a higher quality hub and basically get yourself set up then with a really good wheel. So that at least is a nice thing to see. We'll just focus in on some of this extra stuff here. Of course, we're looking at a boost, through axle rear end, some really nice chainstay protection. This is becoming quite a normal thing on almost every bike from a reputable brand these days, is that you've got good chainstay coverage, something that's both protecting the chainstay and also helping to quiet the chain if it is starting to smash against there. You can get an idea of how taut that clutch on the rear derailleur is, because I can barely flex that down to the chainstay. They have an interesting thing where they actually kind of tie their derailleur cable routing into the protection there before it goes into the chainstay. That's kind of neat. Another neat thing to see here is this MRP chain guide that also includes a bash guard down below. So back when I first discussed the fact that this is 32.8 pounds, it's 32.8 pounds is a good weight. Once you start seeing that there's an MRP chain guide on there, that shows, oh, okay, so that's a pretty extra impressive thing, because we've got some extra weight on there. And then when we look at these tires on here, Minion DHR2, 29 by 2.4, once we look at that little symbol there, the double down casing is not light. It is the choice, or the most common choice, I'd say, for enduro racers on a rear tire, because it's an extremely tough casing, but that comes with a little bit of a weight penalty. So we're looking at proper tires on a bike and still coming in at that 32.8 pounds. When we go to the front tire, that is an Assegai 29 by 2.5 wide trail. That goes to XO Plus, which is the next level lighter casing compared to that double down. Once again, this is indicative of what actual Enduroites would be doing on their bike, is a little bit heavier casing tire on the rear. So this is a very practical build. I mentioned the fact that there's a flip chip on here. That flip chip happens, I hope that this kind of picks up, but it happens all in the back of that rocker link. The rocker link on these Giants is carbon fiber. So the only bit of aluminum on a current Giant Advanced Pro frame is going to be this bottom link. Otherwise, your rear triangle, rocker, front triangle, all carbon fiber. So this is one of the things that has changed on the most recent sort of generation of Giant's carbon bikes, is a very, very full use of carbon in the frame. Looking at the dropper, this is an adjustable travel dropper. On this size medium that we're looking at, this one is set at 170 millimeters, and then it has 3 different settings, each with 10 millimeters of adjustments, so it could go down to 140. Basically the reason that you would want to do that is if you happen to have it so that your collar is bottomed out here and the seat in its full height is a little bit too high for you, then you'd be able to shorten that to sort of optimize your drop. Otherwise, I don't know why anybody would be choosing to do less drop than sort of maximum drop. As we look at the saddle, Giant Romero, I'm a fan of the saddle. Works well, comfortable. No real reason to upgrade there, and we are seeing that they're remaining on a lot more bikes than the Giant saddles from before the Romero days. As we go back around here, for anybody that doesn't know, this combination of links here, this is Giant's Maestro suspension, very similar to DW linkage. It is a short dual link with co-rotating, meaning 2 short links that rotate in the same direction. Works incredibly well. You tend to get really good small bump compliance, good pedaling efficiency, and the way the suspension ramps up, these tend to fight harsh bottom outs really, really well. So I'm a big fan of the Maestro suspension. Of course, we're looking at a Fox X2. This is a Performance Elite rear shock. Once again, this is showing that this bike is designed for a high performance rider. You're getting high speed and low speed compression adjustment on here. Of course, it's got a piggyback, all the performance you'd expect. Basically the same thing as a Fox rear shock without the Kashima coating on the shock, which means almost nothing. It's just all black, which shows a practically good shock, not a look at me good shock. We get to one of the new things on the newest generation of Giant's full suspension bikes, and that is the little trap door. I can never remember which way to turn that. Turn that little dial 90 degrees, pull up from the bottom a bit, slide it, and there you go. The one comment I would have, this is the exact same trap door as what I have on the Trance Advanced that I ride personally. I find the door to be so small that it renders that to be a not super useful sort of a thing. It's also relatively easy to, even though they provided a little bag in there, a little neoprene-ish padded bag, if you do a big drop, you can find your stuff with the harsh jolt getting shocked down into the bottom there, and then you have a hard time yanking your bits out of your down tube. So this is the first place where I'll say nice to see them keeping up with the Joneses with the down tube storage, but I personally haven't found it to be too useful in my own case. If I was going to be putting something in there like a wind vest or something, that wouldn't bother me at all. But putting in something, if you're going to put in anything heavier, just keep that in mind. I've now heard of somebody who has attached like a long zip tie to this bag, so it basically sticks up, and it gives you something to basically grab onto to yank your stuff back up to get it out of this little trap door. So keep that in mind. The cable routing, very neat, not just a rubber grommet, but actually something that's fastened in place there. Of course, it's internal cable routing. That's pretty much what we're used to seeing on just about anything these days. They don't get carried away, just so you know. The rear brake hose comes out of the down tube and then remains external down here, which I am perfectly fine with. I don't think that internal chainstay routing on your rear brake line is a big deal at all. One of the things I'm really liking, this is kind of a new design language, to use a new talking language. This design language that we're starting to now see on the new Trance Advanced and now this Rain Advanced, and when I expect to see in 2024 a Trance X Advanced come out, I will expect to see some of this cool sculpting on this very confidence inspiring top tube, down tube, head tube junction. There's just something very aesthetically pleasing about that whole thing. Giant has gone, as you can see, very minimal on the branding. In fact, if you would have to look awfully hard to see that sort of new school G on the front there. The rain sort of thing up here is almost invisible. I will show you that there is this kind of transition from this beautiful subtly dark sparkling kind of gray that kind of shows off some color in daylight, and then right into this sort of matte colored raw clear coat over top of the remainder of the bike. We have excellent down tube protection here, wrapping all the way around the bottom of the little belly down there, basically as far back as you would imagine needing to have that protection. And then in this little area here, it's not super obvious, but it's quite a thick layer of 3M clear material here. So you do have a good shuttle guard underneath the frame here, and then up here this is going to be more of a rock guard kind of a thing. Getting into the fork, we're looking at 170 millimeter travel Fox 38 with a grip 2 damper. Grip 2 is going to mean that we get high speed and low speed compression controls on our right top knob there, as well as high speed and low speed rebound controls underneath down there. Of course, it's through axle, it's boost, it's an air shock for those who didn't know. What else do you want to know? Oh, let's take a look. These grips, the most ridiculously tiny grip on any adult bike I've seen, I think, ever. It is 120 millimeters long, and we have laughed our asses off in the shop about this grip because an adult-sized hand cannot actually properly fit on there. So if you get this bike in a smaller than a size large, this is a medium, you will get a child's grip on there that you will want to replace right away. Stem, 140 millimeter, I believe, or a 40 millimeter, I believe in this case. A pretty nice giant carbon bar that they put on. This is the Contact SLR. I find the giant branded stuff nice. Rise, I believe 20 millimeters, 780 mils wide. It's got nice kind of sweep, nice rise, all those sorts of things. So quite a comfortable bar that I don't imagine anybody having to upgrade. The giant dropper remote, nothing to complain about on it at all. Works nicely, good positioning, nothing to complain about there. So this is the 2023 Rain Advanced Pro 1, an $8,000 Canadian, ready to race, Enduro 160, 170 carbon Enduro bike. I think if you're looking at this in 2024, you will probably still get some value out of all of these details, because from what I can tell, this bike isn't going to be hugely changed for next year. And 2023 was the first year for this beautiful frame design, so I can say with some certainty that that isn't going to go anywhere. It may just be a few fine details on spec. I hope you like this review. It's long-winded, that's the way I do it, but I also want to give you the close-ups, both things that you can see and maybe from the words coming out of my mouth, maybe learning some things that aren't going to be too obvious from either Giant's website or from other online reviews. If you like this sort of stuff, if you're a bike nerd and just want to be kept abreast of new bikes coming out or other sorts of things to do with bike reviews, like it, subscribe, and we will see you again next time. Thanks so much, and we're out.